Part 4, and talk about April of the Great Rental Experiment. And you'll see a slowdown in the number of movies that I've watched, kind of on purpose, but also I think some in conclusion. So stick around and we'll see what I got to. Hi and welcome back to part 4 of the Great Rental Experiment, the bit where I, as a collector and watcher of great cinema, try to see if I can cut down the amount of money that I spend on films, all while still watching great films or great cinema. And we have a couple of films to really talk about, not really much else other than that. And I'll start with a film that was recommended me by my good friend Elliot Cohen, who on a recent roundtable had recommended me The Hourglass Sanatorium, which was a Czech film from the 70s. It was a bit weird and wonderful, and that, well, he recommended us all, but I knew as soon as he said it, it would be right up my street. Wojciech Kass is the director of it, and The Hourglass Sanatorium is a weird and wonderful kind of psychedelic look at a man who comes to a sanatorium and finds himself lost at the sanatorium. He goes to reclaim the body of his father, and lo and behold, he finds himself as basically in a place where you're wondering where he's ever going to leave the sanatorium, because it all seems a bit weird. And there's a lot of very vivid imagery in The Hourglass Sanatorium, where we have different stages of life and different characters that seem to come in and out of his life, and for parts of it he knows that it's kind of a bit odd, and then other parts of it he's very much living in the moment. He's kind of acting like a character, a player in the role, and you're left to wonder kind of, is he ever going to get out, like I say, or is it just going to be part of those things? Can he escape from the madness that is surrounding him? And it's such a visually arresting film that it always gives you something more, gives you something interesting to look at. And you have a central performance that I think is pretty captivating in the whole part. You have some recurring themes through all the like vignette sequences that are through there, and I think the end is pretty amazing. I think the way they wrap that up and they kind of use it is great. I'd really encourage you to watch Hourglass Sanatorium. I mean, that fella Elliot knows what he's talking about when it comes to interesting films to watch. He knows what's worth putting your time into. And while it doesn't have a very fancy release here, there wasn't much else to be talked about on the release. I think it's a film that stands up in its own right. It's available from Mr. Bongo here, and I think it's pretty great. Next film that I watched was from Toyoshi Toyoda, as part of his original box set, which was the early years of, and this one was Porno Star. It has released by Third Window Film Sandra on release, and it goes without saying it's a Third Window film. It's a weird film. It seems to be sort of like a Yakuza film of some sort, in that you have a couple of characters that we concentrate on, that one's within the Yakuza but kind of doesn't feel like he belongs or is trying to get out, and then you have somebody else that just seems a bit of a loner, and he goes through life and he gets hired to be brought into the Yakuza and help carry be muscle or be... I'm not want to spoil too much because he does some stuff in there, and we kind of have this two-headed dragon, so to speak, of perspectives. It concentrates on one of them a bit more closely, the kind of loner that has a very much he's a loner, but it's very much style like a loner. He has the long overcoat, he brushes past people, he ignores people, and seems to be a bit odd in general. And yet you seem to gravitate and like that character because people seem to judge him or underestimate him, and it kind of comes to the fore. And did I enjoy? Yeah, I did enjoy it. I mean, it's interesting. It kind of didn't go places that I thought it was going to, which is a plus, obviously, for me. But I find some of it a bit of a troll to watch through, because in a couple of places you could see what was going to happen, or when something did happen you went, oh, that's going to end in one way, that's going to mean that the story's going down that direction, and it wasn't necessarily a direction that I wanted to, but it actually did in the end it pulled itself around, and I really quite enjoyed it at that point. So that was Porno Star. Again, wouldn't be a film that I wouldn't run it and get. It'd be something I'd probably pick up in a sale, but if I never seen it again either as well, I think I'd be okay with it, unless I was doing like a rewatch of all two of his films. Then came a film that I knew I was going to like. So we had a Moldovar film called Julieta, and Julieta, well, what can you say about Julieta? Julieta tells the story of a woman who was abandoned by her daughter, who's went disappearing, and she's kind of going through relationships. She's going to move away to a new place, and she's just haunted by the fact that one day her daughter got up and left her. but the story fills in the blanks of why she left her or what led up to her leaving. So it tells the story of her meeting, Julietta meeting her father, and the relationship they had together when she was brought into the world, how a strong relationship and a family unit that they had in the life that they had. And it kind of bounces back and forward between modern day and the past as we kind of examine the person that Julietta is now and the person who she was before, and whether she was wildly different, which she kind of was, and why she's changed and actually what that meant for her as a person. And Almodovar's films I just think are endlessly interesting. They just speak to me on ways that other filmmakers don't. Some people feel he's kind of overtly obtuse in that he kind of picks themes and ideas that kind of like subvert what expectations are. I love that about him. I love the use of the colour. I just think his characters that he uses and he portrays and he takes through are endlessly interesting. And Julietta is a film that I love. I mean, I'll tell you now, if ever there's another movie that I'll see, I'll want to pick it up. He's just that director for me. I think his films are endlessly rewatchable as well, and they often have more themes in them than apparently appears. So while this is feelings of loss, while this film is feelings of abandonment and of responsibility and duty, you know, I've no doubt when I watch it again, I'll see more that comes out of it. And so Julietta's a big roaring success. And then we'll come on to The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot, which is a film about a man who kills Hitler and then Bigfoot. Sounds pretty simple, and it is. It stars Sam Elliott as this kind of wizened old man who has in his past killed Hitler. It's actually very reminiscent of The Tiger, which I talked about a couple of months back. Maybe in my first or second episode of these, where you've got somebody, you know, a famed hunter, and people come back and try and use the fact that he's a great hunter to kill something else, in this case Bigfoot. And in the same way, The Tiger talks about kind of how it's ground him down, how that act of killing and how those monumental kills have really taken a toll on the individual, and you feel the weight and the oppression of those events kind of come out in on the face and in the body language and all the rest of it is. You know, I looked at the reviews for the Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot, and it was recommended to me. I can't remember if it was by Elliot or Into the Blue, Carl. Probably one of those two, because that's where I seem to get most of those kind of recommendations from with more modern films. And a lot of people don't like it. And the thing that strikes me about it is that, okay, not a great deal happens. For a film with that title, you would think that's got non-stop action, and it's not really about that. It's much more pensive and thoughtful than that. But it's one of the best looking films that I can think of. I mean, I just kept on looking and going, God, that's a beautiful shot. It's beautiful shot after beautiful shot after beautiful shot. The way that the camera approaches lots of different things. And I really enjoyed it. It's kind of one of those films that I'll hold very near and dear, you know, in terms of thinking positively of it. You know, if somebody says, well, what do you think of The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot? I go, God, it's a beautiful film. It's kind of touching in places, and sure, not an awful lot happens. It doesn't kind of hit these emotional high points that maybe it could have done with that kind of source material or otherwise, but it leaves you with this kind of thought of, yeah, that was a nice kind of calming sort of thoughtful watch, and it is one that I'm inclined to say bye on, rather than kind of any other feeling with it. So that was it. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is The Gentle Gunman, which came out from Studio Canal's Vintage Classics over the past month. So a recent release that I was able to get on rental, and it tells the story of some Irish Republican activity in London in the 50s, where they were blowing up train stations and whatever else to disrupt order. And it basically tells of I think it's a Meath, of a group of people in Meath family and whatever that seem to be orchestrating a lot of these events in England of blowing up. And it's about a family that falls out, so some people that seem to have left the movement, some people that are very committed to the movement, and kind of there's their loved ones in between, and there's a young boy that's going up to start a new life in Belfast in the shipyards, and kind of how they're trying to keep him out of it, and as he get brought back in. And I mean, the film's okay. It's got John Mills in it. It's got Dirk Bogarde in it, etc. You know, there are good people in it, but they all do some of the worst Irish accents and Northern Irish accents that I've ever heard in my entire life. It's absolutely woeful. I mean, it's actually alluded to in the extras as well, so it obviously must be famed for that in its own right. The best character in it's the Doctor and his friend, who they come to at the end without spoiling anything. They start off the film, they appear random places throughout it. They're great. I think they're fantastic. But look, the General Gunman's okay. It's kind of a film of its time, I think. It's kind of a bit laughable in places when you look at the history of the Republican movement and all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's fine. And I mean, that kind of family in turmoil within terrorism is kind of well worn, I suppose, by this time. But maybe the end was really groundbreaking. But for me, it's probably going to be one that I mean, I can pick it up and seal because they're lovely slipcovers. But other than that, I'll probably give it a miss. I'm glad that I've seen it. I can talk about it like I have just done with you. But otherwise, okay. And that was my watching, and you probably realise there's not an awful lot of films in there. I did say at the end of the last episode that I was coming to a bit of a crossroads. Now, there's a couple of things to point out about this in terms of, well, the idea was to buy less Blu-rays. And I really didn't buy very many Blu-rays last month. In fact, the only things that I bought were, I get the Indicator batch every month. I got the couple of Eureka titles that were out, because the Eureka titles, the Kung Fu and then the Three Monsters collection, great. And then a couple of the Criterion releases, and that was it. And for me, I had no random pickups. I had no pickups of a nature whereby, oh God, I'll get that, no BFI, no 88, nothing of that. And I'm not really that much planned for the next month. I've broken that habit. I'm still getting some recent releases, and I've even cut down on some of my rental as well, because I need to make my way through my collection. And so this will probably be the last episode of this Great Rental Experiment, because it's done. The experiment is hold its place. Now, there are other reasons why my general film watching have went down, and there'll be a video coming out about that soon, about where I'm kind of dividing up my time and trying to get more balance. But by and large, this rental experiment has worked. You can knock the package up to as many releases as you want, so you get lots and a constant churn of great releases, or you can knock it down to a level you're more comfortable with. My problem was, worked it up really high, was I wasn't using my own collection at all. Come down, we'll get a balance between those releases that I'm not sure whether I want to pick up, my own collection, and then my other hobbies and interests that I can do alongside as well. So, an interesting experiment. I'm really glad they did it. If you've enjoyed kind of listening to me kind of debate an awful lot of this stuff in my head, you know, you can give me what your thoughts, whether you could do something similar yourself. Maybe you don't even have those options in terms of a great rental service to use. But for me, that is the Great Rental Experiment, episode 4, and done. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. And I'll speak to you again soon, when this kind of format will revert back to a watch list of sorts. Speak to you then. Take care.